to dead man talking. Tonight's show is another compilation episode that I hope you can all sink your teeth into. As ever, please do let us know down below in the comments what you thought. Please do like and share, it really does help build the channel and our community further. And of course, don't forget to hashtag TeamFEAR. If you have a story that you'd like to share with us all here on the show, please do get that over to me on the website, of course, which is www.mine.Their.com. And so, without further ado, let's get into tonight's first story. From the author, Wolfie writes, entitled, "Something sinister lurked in my childhood woods. It ruined my life." Let's get straight into that. The trees looming outside my bedroom window swayed in temptation. Something sinister lurked beyond. Even as a child I knew. As the night crept on, their pacing would increase, and by 3 in the morning, they would rattle my entire room, shaking the ground like an earthquake. I tried to tell my parents that something just wasn't right about those woods, but, as most adults would, they dismissed me as a child with an overactive imagination. Looking back now, I can't say I had done anything different for my own children. Sometimes though, even having moved across the country from my childhood home, when I wake up at 3 in the morning, shaking in terror, I can't help but blame them for what happened on that November night. For the consequences of their misguided attempts at allowing me to conquer my fears weigh on my life heavily. It stripped away the adventure I used to have and replaced it with lackluster courage that scarcely allows me to leave my house past dark. I will recount to you now, omitting no details and sharing no false truths, the story of my childhood woods. "Mum," I said, shaking her awake, "there's something in the woods coming to get me." She blinked a few times and then tried, but failed to hide her irritation as she asked, "Charlie, how do you know it's coming to get you?" I took a breath and began to speak, and then stopped. The truth was, I couldn't explain how I knew. I just knew. My mother sighed, then rolled over and went back to sleep, tossing me the words, "Just go back to bed, honey, please." I didn't go back to sleep, not that night or the next. Rather, I slept during school and in the car on the way there. Sleeping at night in my bedroom with what was lurking just outside was impossible. After the third sleepless night, my teacher called home and explained to my mother that I had been sleeping in class for the past 3 days. I, in turn, explained to my mother that I couldn't sleep in my room anymore, not with the monster watching me. She sighed and fruitlessly tried to explain that nothing was coming to get me, but in the end, I slept in my parents' bed for the rest of the week. That Friday night, just after dinner, my dad tapped me on the shoulder and brought me into my room. "Listen, son," he said, staring out of my bedroom window. "I know it looks scary out there, like there's some big bad monster waiting for the perfect moment to come and get you. But trust me, the woods are safe. I used to spend a lot of my time out there when I was your..." "But that was a different woods," I interjected. "There's something wrong with this one. It's not like your woods." He brought his hands to his face and rubbed his temples. "Why don't you and your brother go out there for a little bit? He'll show you that everything's okay, and then maybe you can sleep in your own bed." I looked down at my feet, and then at anywhere and everywhere except for him and the window. I didn't want to go out, but even so, I knew that I had no choice. I had to face this. "Mason!" he screamed, calling to my 15-year-old brother. Before I could say a word, my father spoke once more. "Go on, get your shoes, it'll be quick." I waited by the back door for a few minutes before Mason came crashing down the stairs and walked past me viciously, swinging the door open as he grumbled, "Come on, you fucking baby." I followed him outside, and we started walking slowly towards the woods. It was around 7, and the tips of the trees were just beginning to sway, although there was no noticeable wind in the air. I felt Mason tense up as we got closer to the woods. As much as he tried to hide it, he could feel it as much as I could. Something in the air, and it was sinister. The atmosphere made me feel like we were at a funeral. The silence was palpable. It was much quieter than it should have been. I made eye contact with Mason, and he gulped and then nodded. When we were mere feet away from the trees, I tried to pull backwards towards the house. We had to get out of there. Something bad was about to happen. However, Mason grabbed me by the hand and pulled me into a hug and said for the first time and last, "I love you." I held in a sob. "I love you too." "I'm sorry for being so mean to you," he said. "I know you're scared, and that's okay. But don't you want to be brave? You can't be brave unless there's something to be afraid of." He led me out of the hug and then paused for a moment before grabbing my hand once more, and this time he was talking more to himself than he was to me. "Sometimes you have to face your fears." We walked maybe 10, 20 yards into the woods before he let go of my hand. It seemed peaceful out there, safe even. I breathed a sigh of relief and then looked at my brother and smiled, an expression which he returned. He opened his mouth to speak, but before he could even begin the sentence, the sound of the trees shaking picked up so rapidly that it was too loud for there to be any sense in talking at all. I looked into his eyes and saw dismay mixed with disbelief. I heard a crunching sound deep in the forest, like a large animal walking on sticks and leaves. Mason grabbed my arm and started to pull me out of the woods, but I was frozen. My body was locked in place as my mind swam in terror. I was right about the woods all along, and now it, whatever it was coming for me, and all I could do was wait. Mason picked me up and began running towards home. "It's just storming. We got to get out before..." The ground shook, and I screamed as I heard a tree fall in the distance. Mason stopped running for just a moment as he turned to look, but in that instant, I threw myself from his arms, my urge to run never greater. And run I did, so fast that Mason's screaming of my name quickly faded into nothing. It was minutes before I realized that somehow, in my terror, I had run the wrong direction. I was only working my way deeper and deeper into the woods. Today, I'm not so certain that I was running the wrong way. After recounting the events of that night so many times in my head over the years, I've come to the conclusion that, for those few hours I spent in the woods, there was no way out. I was trapped in an inescapable labyrinth that something from outside of our world had created for me. I was its prey, and it was not letting me go without a fight. I stopped abruptly when I realized that I wasn't getting any closer to home, and did the only thing that I could think to do. I screamed for my brother as loud as I could, assuming that he would hear me and come to my rescue momentarily. However, what I heard in response was not the calm and reassuring voice of a brother coming to the aid of his panicked sibling, but rather the deep, raspy tone of a monster I had been quietly evading for my entire childhood. "Charlie," it whispered, stretching the word out into several syllables as if it were an entire sentence. "Where did you go, Charlie?" I spun around over and over, eyeing each tree as I attempted to find the source of the voice. "Where are you?" I asked. "Where's my brother?" All I heard was a chuckle, but this time I could feel the sound entering my ears like a breath of someone whispering from mere inches away. It tickled my eardrums and I shivered. "Can I leave?" I asked. "I just want to go home. I won't come back here, I promise." "But Charlie," the voice said, now childlike and seeming to come from one specific tree directly in front of me, "I don't want you to go." "Okay," I whimpered. "Please, God. Oh, God. Oh, God, someone save me." Finally, the monster stepped out from behind the tree. I was too afraid to move. I was stuck facing the very thing that had taunted me for years, and now it was very likely going to kill me. The monster was a tree, a small one, only slightly bigger than I was. Even so, its body was thick and strong, but seemed agile enough to catch me quickly. It had no discernible face, but in its voice, it held a smile at times. I looked around once more for somewhere to run or hide, but there was nothing. I was completely at its mercy. "What do you want me to do?" I asked. "Play with me." It began to walk towards me slowly, its branches crackling at each step, and somehow they didn't give way to the weight of the monster. By the time it reached me, I was screaming and crying and yelling for my brother and parents or anyone who could come and save me. But even at 8 years old, I knew that no saviour would be coming. My fate was in the hands of the monster who had been waiting for a little boy like myself to stumble into his domain for God knows how long. It reached a hand towards my face, slowly, as if it was trying to comfort me, but when I flinched it stopped and said, "It's okay," before running a rough branch across my cheek. In the wake of its touch was a long and deep cut that left a taste of blood in my mouth. I spat, and the creature made a forced laughing sound, as if it found no comedy, but felt the need to show some emotion. "Ah, child, don't worry. You will be going home soon enough." "I can go back to my parents and my brother." It attempted to laugh once more. "No, child. You'll be coming to my home with me." As soon as the words left its mouth, I began sprinting away, even as I knew I wouldn't make it far. However, at the same moment that I began my escape, my brother burst in from the opposite direction and attempted to tackle the monster. The creature wasn't having it though. It was as if my brother had attempted to tackle, well, a tree. I heard a bone in his shoulder crack and break, and then I heard him scream in agony. He had done nothing but anger it, nothing but drive it to murder. Without breaking my sprint, I turned and saw the beast whip around to my brother, who was already lying motionless on the ground. I saw it raise its sharpest branch up into the air and bring it down as hard as it could, right through my brother's chest and into his heart. He let out a muffled scream as blood spurted from his mouth and chest. The red liquid hit the middle of the creature's body and stuck like paint on a canvas. I knew he was dead, and so I turned and kept running. I heard the creature chasing after me, and I heard it calling my name, but somehow I knew that it wasn't going to catch me. Its terror needed a host to live on, and for that to happen, I had to survive the encounter with the image of it murdering my brother, trapped in my head for the rest of my life. My brother's body was never recovered, and the creature was never seen again. Although I recounted the events several times to both my parents and the authorities, the official story is that my brother had likely been killed in a wild bear attack. Only I know the truth. I no longer enter the woods, and I no longer write every spooky story off as a fake. The truth is that the world holds creatures much more sinister than you or I could ever imagine. And my brother's death, along with my own memories, testify to that fact. I am forever terrified because I know that monsters really do exist, and we are not alone. The world is not safe. This next story is by the wonderful Midnight author, entitled There is Something in the Trees Outside Camas, Utah. Let's get straight into that. I've been a police officer in my hometown of Camas, Utah for as long as I can remember. I never really had any desire to wear the badge. Hell, I never really had any desire to do anything but play baseball. I just had one issue in that regard. I sucked. My father was a police officer, and over time he worked his way up to the chief, replacing his own PA in that position when the time came. Naturally, I followed suit, joining the family business, right after I turned 18. Although I didn't yearn for the badge, I slowly grew into the role and found myself enjoying most days on the job, and just this last year I, myself, replaced my PA as chief, and being thrust into the position at a younger than average age, which was an extremely proud moment for myself and my family. The job, it's an easy one, I won't lie, in that regard. Camus has a crime rate of 53% lower than the national average. Everybody here knows each other, and any disputes can be pretty easily dealt with through a discussion with both parties. Honestly, this town probably doesn't need any police. Well, that was until 5 years ago, when they arrived. They were the children of chaotic freedom, a group that arrived in Camus to, as they claimed, live a life of religious freedom and to be closer to the earth. Your guess is as good as mine. Their arrival in the town was met with hostility and an overall air of anxiety. Our locals weren't accustomed to outsiders, especially not 44 of them. That were part of a cult. To ease tensions in our placid town, myself and my pops took a trip out to their commune to hold a meeting with the group's leader, Sidney Savage. The commune was a 5-minute drive just northwest of the main town area. It was a secluded area just off to the left of the dirt road. The large wooden gates towered above the minuscule array of flora which grew there. It stuck out like a sore thumb in an otherwise barren wasteland. My pops and I were met at the gate by two immensely large men. They wore white shirts, black slacks, and black ties that both donned an insignia of a red circle with arrows pointing outwards from all directions. Both men looked virtually identical, shaved heads, pale, almost grey skin, dirty yellow teeth, and piercing emerald eyes. They did not speak when we introduced ourselves and refused our outstretched hands. They led us through the gates and into a large hut just right at the entrance. Inside the hut, a woman also sporting a shaved head and green eyes, though wearing a bland brown robe, filled both of us a cup of water before leaving without uttering a word. Sidney Savage was the antithesis of his followers. While they were strange, bland and robotic, he was charismatic, energetic and friendly. His followers wore plain and frankly depressing clothing, while he donned a vibrant and immaculate slim-fitted, ivory-coloured suit. He wasn't a large man by any means, standing around 5'5", but he had a deceptively strong handshake that he didn't seem to force. He had a strong head of slicked back black hair, and deep brown eyes that often became challenging to discern from his pupils in the dimly lit hut. As we spoke, Sidney would flick a coin through his fingers for the entire 10-minute discussion. My father said nothing during this time, favouring me in a speaking role while he transfixed on the coin like a cat focused on a laser pointer. The conversation was rather rudimentary and nothing of note came up. Sidney explained that the group wanted to be away from the busy city life, but didn't want to intrude on the town, so chose to stay at a distance while still being close enough to mingle and partake in trade. Once the discussion reached its logical conclusion, without any antagonism or before we overstayed our welcome, we departed back to the cruiser and drove back to the warm familiarity of our own town. "You alright, Pop? You ain't said a word in ages," I asked my newly mute father. "Huh? Yeah, I'm fine. Don't worry about it, boy," he eventually responded. "I don't think we're gonna have much trouble from them folk. Johnny, we're gonna be alright." And he was correct. Until he wasn't. 6 months passed from when the group first arrived in Camus. They mostly kept to themselves in that time, only venturing into the town when they had items to buy or sell. They would often buy supplies and tools while they would sell things like furniture they had built and crops they had grown. They must have been well versed in agriculture, as their ability to grow crops in that area was astounding. Their trips into town would rarely last too long, and they would speak as little as possible with the town folk, Sidney was never spotted and most likely chose to stay in the commune. They were a weird group, but they never caused any issues until one night when 3 members of the group arrived at Mike's Metal Bar. Witnesses say that they were much more social this time than any other time in the past, buying people drinks and conversing with others in the bar. However, these conversations mostly revolved around the commune and the cult and why people should join them out there to better themselves and this world. After the 3 members became overly assertive with some patrons of the bar, the 2 security guards attempted to remove them. However, the 2 male members quickly turned violent and smashed their glasses across the faces of the security guards. The female member was then said to have brandished a butterfly knife, which she then drove into the chest of one of the guards before wiping off the blood across her face. The 3 members quickly fled while customers tended to the injured guards. It took some time for us to question the witnesses and gain a good understanding of what went down in the bar. But once it became apparent that the friendly cult was in fact as dangerous as every other cult, I rounded up the troops and drove out towards the commune. My father strangely refused to go and even questioned my desire to. He felt it wasn't clear-cut enough that the cult was involved and it could simply have been 3 outsiders or fraudsters, knowing they could point the blame. I, enraged, stormed out of the bar and took every other officer in the town with me, warning them to be prepared to be met by hostility and most likely violence once we arrived. However, once we actually arrived at the location of the commune, we were met by bewilderment and shock. The commune and the people who frequented it were gone, with almost no trace left behind but some gates, some cultivated areas of soil with a few carrots growing, and the huts where we first met Sidney. Even the large gates had been taken down and most likely brought with them to wherever they went. I decided to enter the hut alone in case it was an elaborate trap set by these lunatics. Inside, however, was nothing but a letter sitting on the table. The letter had been written on a torn notebook page, the number 8112 scrawled across the top. Beneath it, a simple message left for my eyes exclusively. "See you soon, kid. Say hi to your old man for me. Sid." Confused and downright pissed off, I folded the letter and placed it in my shirt pocket and then departed the hut and what was left of the commune. The station put out an APB on the group, but we never heard back on it. I never expected to. Groups like that live off-grid and seeing firsthand the speed they possess in packing up and leaving, I imagine they did this kind of thing quite often. A few years passed and the town moved on from the group. They simply became an anecdote you would tell over a few drinks or to a family member visiting from out of town. Do you remember that crazy cult a few years back? Whatever happened to them? Their impact wasn't fully forgotten, however. In their place, a tree had grown right in the centre of the commune's former locale. The strangest part about this was the speed in which it grew. It had grown over 30 feet in 5 years. I could not believe my eyes when, after 2 years, it had grown larger than most adult trees. Martin Sanchez, the town's local gardener, an expert arborist, though was not as shocked. When the tree was first noticed, he was obviously called for his expertise. He correctly identified the tree as a weeping willow, which has the ability to grow 3 to 8 feet in a year, and so the growth was somewhat normal. What astonished Martin was the fact that the tree could grow at all in such an arid area. He took a special interest in the tree from that point on and decided to tend to it most mornings for the next few years, both to ensure it stayed healthy and to study the tree in an attempt to understand just how it was growing in here, of all places. This morning, I got a call from Martin. When I checked my alarm clock on the bedside locker, I'd seen it was 6:43 a.m. He was distraught and incoherent, shouting down the phone to, "Come quick, tree, quickly, they need us," before hanging up randomly. He was calling me in a state this early, then it must have been serious. I got in my cruiser and drove out to the location of the tree. I had originally theorized that it was most likely damaged by some hoodlums or possibly even burned, which would have distressed Martin due to the care he had given to it. but when I turned off the road and onto the dirt, I saw the tree, and it looked to be as fine as it always had looked, though there seemed to be something foreign hanging between the drooping leaves and branches. As I drove closer, I saw Martin hunkered down in the dirt, weeping. I approached him, but he did not change his stance or acknowledge me. He just stared, aimlessly, into the dirt beneath him as tears flowed down his wrinkled face. I reached out my hand and placed it on his shoulder. "Martin, what's wrong? What's happened?" I inquired. He slowly raised his head to look at me. A look of abject terror was painted across his usually smiling face. He pointed up to the tree but said nothing. He just pointed and lowered his head once more. I looked up and could not believe my eyes. The foreign objects hanging from the trees were humans. This next story is sent over by a good friend of the show, who simply go by the name Brad, with a story simply entitled "The One-Armed Dog Man and How I Lost My Right Eye." Let's get straight into that. First off, my name is Brad, and this is a story about my family and my own run-ins with a one-armed dog man that has become my greatest enemy. Well, let's get into that. Starting off, I am a well-seasoned hunter and outdoorsman, and have been trained by the Cherokee elders in many arts, mainly fighting, hunting, and knife techniques. But enough about me, let's talk about how I lost an eye, and that bastard monster lost his right arm. Well, it was morning like any other in the mountains of North Carolina, cool and crisp, and damn well scary to those who don't know these hills. I was heading to my best location for white-tailed deer, which is an area called Wolf Ridge, named so by my father, who had his own encounters with this beast, but that's another story. And so I crested a ridge overlooking a stand of pines and sat down at the base of a large oak tree. And then, as I began to focus, the feeling hit me. No sounds, no smells. In other words, something is not right. After years of hunting these hills, my senses are fine-tuned, and that's when I heard the sound of dripping. I felt something hitting the brim of my hat. As I looked up, my blood ran cold, for above me in the branches was a large buck that had been torn to shreds. Seeing this, I knew that whatever killed this buck had to be close, as the blood that fell upon me was still very warm. Snap! A sound right behind me in the brush. Thinking fast, I dropped to my knees, just in time to dodge the claws of this thing. But its charging bulk took me, and I rolled down the hill, a short distance, then jumped to my feet. I was met with the sight and sound of a beast from hell. Now I believe my father, and now I know these things are called dogmen. 8 feet tall, 700 pounds of upright werewolf. At the least, I was very outgunned and outclawed. I thought, I'm dead for sure. And then something happened. My training took over, and it saved my life. Now my rifle was leaned on the tree below the buck, and he was between me and it. And so I pulled my tomahawk and knife. And what happened next was, and still is hard to explain, but I'll try to do my best. This hulking beast charged me and clawed at my throat. I ducked just in time, but he only managed to blind me in my right eye. Time seemed to slow as I swung my blade up, severing his arm right below the elbow and jamming my tomahawk deep into his thigh. In the same moment, he howled in pain and fell to his knees, clutching his stump. Ha 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 ha, the bastard will remember that. Then, where was I? Oh yes, as he glared at me with more hatred than Satan himself could bear. I reached for the rifle, and man, did I let him have it. 4 rounds of 30-30 into his chest. Next thing I know, he is running down the hill at speed I can't even imagine. I did the same, but in the opposite direction. I only stopped when I realised that I had put good distance between us. The pain. Oh God, the pain. It hit me and sent me to the ground. And that's when I realised my eye it was destroyed. I got out of those woods with one less eye and my life. I'm sure the beast is alive. I hear his howls more than often now, and I fear he may return for his arm and my life. Wow. Absolutely awesome stuff. As ever, please do let us know down below in the comments what you thought. Please do like and share, and of course, don't forget to hashtag TeamFEAR. As I said before, if you have a story you'd like to share with us here on the show, please do get it over to myself at a website which is www.DMTForestofFear.com. I hope you're all well and happy, and looking forward to the wonderful weekend ahead. And above all, remember, be safe, not sorry.